Hello, everybody. Welcome inside the Fantasy Hut for our third fantasy basketball podcast of the season. I'm the league commissioner, David Chiarsis, bringing you somewhat of an informal show today. As you can see, I'm missing my usual co-host, Luke Gores, but I thought it would be a good time to discuss the current state of the league. We're just past the halfway point of the season. It's been a couple weeks since our last show, and there's been a number of very important injuries and some big trades in the league to discuss. So I'm here to break it all down. I guess, we'll talk about my team a little bit first. After the draft, I knew that my team was different than years past, and I didn't really know how to feel about it. Of course, I've had some big injuries, but I think in general, my team is just so different. Usually my teams are kind of predicated on bigs and rebounding, and I'm ranked last in rebounds, and my team has certainly not lived up to my expectations of what I come to expect from my teams during the fantasy basketball season. Obviously, number of injuries, and it's funny, anytime I start to feel somewhat optimistic about my team, something happens. Last night, this is being filmed on Saturday, so Friday night, Tyreke Evans re-aggravates his ankle injury. Tobias Harris may have re-aggravated his ankle injury. Gordon Hayward sits out with a hip injury. Nikola Vucevic now missing some time with a concussion. Traded for Ryan Anderson. He goes down with a herniated disc. Was kind of forced to drop him because I'm not in any position to wait on any injured players. But just a very disappointing season, and I think kind of a wake-up call for me. I've had some success, not just in the league, but in past fantasy basketball seasons. This is kind of my first season in which I've struggled, and it's definitely been a learning experience. Currently in ninth place. Obviously, I'm not one to ever give up on a team, but it's been a long season, and it doesn't look like it's going to get any better. We'll see if I can maybe fight my way into the playoff hunt. If not, could be looking at the lottery for the first time. My usual co-host, like I said, Luke Gores, he's had some similar struggles. He'd probably blame the injuries, but I think like me, he just didn't draft well. He's made some trades recently that I'm going to discuss that, are obviously moves for the future. His current record is 30-79-1. I'm sure not where he expected to be with all the mock drafts he did in the offseason, but both of us in no position to really give any fantasy basketball advice given the current state of our team. So we're gonna talk about the others in the league that look like they could be headed for the postseason. But first, I think there's been a number of big trades that we have to break down. I think first, and it's funny, Black Kemba, Ryan Mongillo, he was in first place. Started the season off well. Let's see, won his first 5 matchups. 7 of his first 8, but has recently lost 2 straight. Trying to make some deals as always to get back in the hunt. I think he currently sits in 5th place, which is his lowest that he's been in the standings all season. So some deals he's made recently. A pair with Luke. That were, like I said, Luke looking towards the future, Mongillo trying to win right now. Mongillo traded Monte Ellis and Rajon Rondo, as me and Luke discussed in nauseum in the Draft Day podcast, was kind of the Derrick Rose of this season, was going to miss a lot of the season, but is a valuable enough fantasy basketball player that, if he becomes a valuable trade asset, and Mongillo turned him into one, sending Ellis and Rondo to Luke for Al Horford. At the time, great deal for Mongillo. Horford's been a stud, was a second-round pick, a guy that I actually passed on in the draft that I wish I hadn't. And obviously Luke picking up Rondo for the future probably becomes one of the more valuable keepers in our league, assuming he can, return from his ACL injury and perform like he has in the past. But Horford now is one of the, most recent big injuries suffered in the NBA. There's been a number of key players that have gone down, that have kind of watered down this NBA season. It's really disappointing as a fan to see. And one side note though, it's some of these injuries I'm going to discuss. It's nice to see that someone other than me and Luke are getting hit by some of these crippling injuries, and some other teams have had to adjust and plan on the fly. So that was a great trade, I thought, for Mongillo. Horford, like I said, has been a stud, but with him down for the season, that's a big loss for Mongillo and might hurt his title chances. A second trade that Mongillo then made with Luke, he sends Klay Thompson, Mike Conley, and Tyson Chandler to Luke for Al Jefferson, John Wall, and J.R. Smith. I'm going to cancel out the Knicks. They haven't really been very productive this season, but Mongillo picking up Al Jefferson and John Wall, obviously 2 huge pickups. Wall was a 4th-round keeper for Luke, and then Al Jefferson was his 1st-round pick. or second round pick, excuse me. So obviously, another win now move for Mongillo that I think will help him make up for the loss of Hoyford. This was the trade I was questioning with Luke. I understand you have no shot for the playoffs. You look for a team that's looking to win now and make a deal for the future. But Klay Thompson, really just a score-first guard, not someone that you want to heavily invest in, I think, for the offseason. Luke has some options as far as keepers go and can maybe make some deals in the offseason. And, we're still about 3 weeks away from the trade deadline. But just a questionable deal that, I didn't like for Luke. I think you could, me and him talked a lot about possibilities of trading Al Jefferson and John Wall to get future keepers, and I don't think Klay Thompson was the guy. But we'll see if maybe Luke has another trade in the future. And then a trade I made with Mongillo that I wasn't really sure about, but like I said, I've dealt with so many injuries. I needed to make a move, needed to make a change, try to get something going. I dealt Conley, who, Mongillo then traded to Luke. Mike Conley, Marc Gasol, who's been out just, for about 2 months now for me and just couldn't afford to wait any longer for him. And Kyle Korver for Dwayne Wade, Tyreke Evans, and Ryan Anderson. At the time, I didn't know whether it was going to be a good deal. I started to like it. My team was playing a little better. I ended a losing streak by beating top dogs 2 weeks ago. But then Anderson goes down with the herniated disc, was forced to drop him, couldn't wait on another injured player. I'll take the D Wade sitting every other game, or the kind of the plan that he's on, because when he's played, he's been Dwayne Wade. And then Evans actually has been pretty solid for me. Like I said, he tweaked his ankle injury last night, so I'll have to see what's up with that. But I thought was a kind of a win-win for both teams, especially for Mongillo. If Gasol comes back and can be effective, certainly a good long-term move for Gasol. For Mongillo, if he gets Gasol back healthy. I needed to do something, and I really don't know if it's going to help my team. Just like I said, lacking bigs and just not performing well in the rebounding categories, which is kind of the basis, I think, for a quality, efficient fantasy basketball team. So the injuries obviously have played a big role in it's kind of where some teams sit now. I think a team I really want to talk about is Top Dogs, and I think a little bit of him it's the trades that Mike made that just I didn't like. He dealt for Darren Williams and Brook Lopez, who were battling injuries, and he lost Brook Lopez for the whole season. Chris Paul goes down, is now out for maybe close to 2 months. That's really gonna hurt Top Dogs. He's lost 6 in a row, getting beat big time right now by 40s. Top Dogs was a team I really liked. Was in the top half of the standings for probably half of the first half of the season, and since he made those trades, he dealt Bosch, Boozer, and someone else I'm forgetting right now for Dwight Howard, and was a trade. And DeMar DeRozan was a trade that me and Luke broke down. And Top Dogs is just in free fall, whether it's because of the trades or some injuries that it's suffered now. He looked like a lock as a playoff team, but just in free fall right now and not looking good for him. We talked about the Al Horford trade and how big that is for Black Kemba. Making up for it a little bit by getting Jefferson and Wall, and we'll see if those two can make up for the loss of him a little bit. Uncle Drew's All-Stars, who is red hot. Top half of the league in many of our stat categories. Just lost to Eric Bledsoe, who dynamic player, has been had a real breakout season in his first season as a starter in Phoenix. Him and Goran Dragic have been playing really well together, but he now had surgery on Friday night to repair a torn meniscus. He's out till at least the All-Star break. Uncle Drew's All-Stars, though, currently in first place. So not a huge loss, certainly something that the team can withstand a little bit and hopefully get him back for the stretch run and into the postseason. Another recent injury happened. News broke yesterday, Friday night, about Drew Holiday. I think a fractured tibia. He's going to be out for indefinitely. We don't have a timetable on him. Really hurts swooping and hooping, whose team has been playing really well. Not a team that I particularly liked in the preseason after the drafts, but It's on a little bit of a roll lately. Won 3 of its last 4 matchups. Really playing well. Drew Holiday was a big part of that. Really well-rounded point guard. Good fantasy player. So that's a big loss for Swooping and Hooping. We'll have to see how it withstands that. And then Novocaine, who's kind of in the basement with me and Luke, losing Westbrook. He's out till beyond the All-Star break, and he may not be rushed back this time like he was the first to avoid re-injury. Novocaine, like me, lacking bigs, just don't know if it's going to have enough to kind of stay in the playoff picture, especially without Westbrook. Playing okay of late, has won 2 of its last 3 matchups, but just don't know if it's going to have enough firepower to kind of stay in it. So we're talking about all these players. We'll talk about some teams in the league. My power rankings are going to be coming out this week, my newest version, where I'll do something a little bit different, where I'll break down the stat rankings and kind of see, looking back and with an eye towards the future postseason run, what teams, what stats have kind of stood out to me and maybe will predict future success going into the playoffs, and maybe who's set up to win the title this season. I think any talk about title contenders has to start with our top 2 teams, Uncle Drew's All-Stars and 40s. They've really been the 2 best teams all season. Both talking about all these injuries, both have had some luck with the injuries as well. Uncle Drew's just lost Bledsoe, but other than that, has been relatively healthy for most of the season. Kyrie Irving avoided a knee scare recently, came back, had a great game on Friday night. Joe dealt with the Anthony Davis hand injury, but he's back playing well. And with all the injuries that New Orleans has, you have to expect that Davis is going to carry the load the rest of the way. He's had probably the best luck of in terms of injuries, and honestly, 40s is just loaded. The keepers of George and Davis kind of set the standard for, Brandon Jennings having a great season. Monroe's been solid. DeMarcus Cousins having a breakout year. Isaiah Thomas having a breakout year. Durant, obviously, one of the top 2 players in fantasy. And then Reggie Jackson, somebody I had and dropped, gave up on, and Joe picked him up, and he's been great of late, especially with Westbrook going down. So things just kind of falling 40s' way, which, I've talked a lot about. You got to have some luck in fantasy sports, and Uncle Drew's All-Stars and 40s, with all the injuries going on around them, have certainly had some luck, and just have very deep rosters. I think, like I said, if you draft well, your team's going to be in it all season. You don't draft well, it's going to be a long year, and both those guys drafted well. Right below them, team I really like that I think is flying a little bit under the radar is Kamoli. I talk about how, rebounding is a good basis for a fantasy basketball team because it's the most consistent stat, and you have a lot of bigs, you're going to get rebounds, you're going to be efficient from the field. Kamoli has a wealth of bigs that I think is definitely makes him a contender. Boozer, Bosch, Varejao, Noah, Duncan, just kind of loaded up front. David West, and then he's got LeBron. Lowry's playing a lot better since the Rudy Gay trade. DeRozan getting more opportunities since the Rudy Gay trade. Wesley Matthews has been solid, and then he's got Tony Parker, who's having another great year. And then stashing Kobe Bryant, who I had to drop after he came back and then got re-injured. If Kobe comes back and can give Kamoli anything, look out for him in the playoffs. And then you have your middle-of-the-pack teams. Right below them, Euros and Stretch Fours, Black Kemba, Swooping and Hooping. That, if I had to say now, our top 6 teams in the standings are probably going to be the 6 playoff teams. They've been the most consistent and have had kind of the best injury luck. All 3 are playing really well right now. I think Euros and Stretch Fours is on a little run, has won 4 of its last 5 weekly matchups after losing 4 straight early in the season. Swooping and Hooping, like I said, has won 3 of its last 4. And then Black Kemba struggling a little bit lately. I think his team may be a little bit of a wild card considering some of the injuries that he's dealt with. So it should be an interesting playoff run. If those are our 6 playoff teams, we're halfway through the season and we already know who's going to be playing in the postseason. The important thing for the teams that are going to be in the lottery is fighting for 7th. The new rule we're doing this year is whoever finishes in 7th gets that top pick. So 7th and 8th means LeBron James and Kevin Durant next season, most likely. So still a lot to be decided, and no way is anybody out of the playoffs probably giving up. Trade deadline's in 3 weeks, so it should be interesting to see if some more big trades go down. There's an interesting dynamic of teams trying to win now and maybe teams trying to plan for the future. So, that could lead to some big deals that could shape the rest of this season, not just moving forward with keepers for next season. So, important to keep an eye on all that. And obviously, given the injuries we've seen this year, there always could be another one that kind of shakes up the league. So, we'll have to see what happens down the stretch in the coming weeks. Hopefully, my next show, Luke will be here to talk about the season, and we'll get his take on some of the other teams, because certainly his team doesn't seem to be going anywhere. So I guess one good thing is my team might not be as bad as his, because I'm currently beating him this week. Hopefully my team can hold on for the victory, maybe get some momentum going. But just considering the bad luck, I mean, again, talking about luck, every single night it seems like I'm getting somebody banged up or just something's happening in my team. Well, that's it. That's the recap of the league. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon and breaking everything down in the league, and we hope you'll join us.